honor this morning. So good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Welcome to the World Affairs Friday with the Peoria Area World Affairs Council and Bradley University. As is customary, we're going to record this program, so please mute yourself so that we can give full attention to our distinguished guests. And there will be time later if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question of Ambassador Torres. And you can also submit your questions in the chat box at the end or at the bottom of your screen. So, Mac, for some reason, you are the spotlight video. So I'm just gonna do something else quickly. Okay, I don't know. Okay, all right. This week, we are honored to be joined by Ambassador Reyna Torres Mendivil, Consul General of Mexico in Chicago. Before assuming her current position in March 2019, she served as Consul General in San Antonio. The ambassador has also held positions of General Director for Protection of Mexicans Abroad, Consul of Mexico in Fresno, California, and General Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. Ambassador Torres was also Deputy Chief of Mission at the Mexican Embassy in the Czech Republic and a political analyst and liaison with Congress, federal authorities, and civil societies in the Embassy of Mexico in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Torres Mendivil was a resident fellow at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs at Harvard University, and she represented her country in the Hemispheric Security Program at the Inter-American Defense College. She graduated from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, and I apologize for wrecking that, and holds a master's degree in international relations from the London School of Economics. Ambassador Torres, take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you really for this invitation. Congratulations to the Peoria Area World Affairs Council for your 50th anniversary. I know there's several chapters of the World Affairs Council, and it's amazing how you strengthen the work that all diplomats old-fashioned do. Actually, what you do is really much more important in a sense that it brings whatever is going on in the world to the people, at the local level, and in a fashion that touches the lives or explains how all these developments in the world affect the citizens, at the very local level. So I really appreciate that, and congratulations. I'm hoping that you have a big celebration next year, since this year was so hectic for everyone. So I'm really looking forward for the celebration next year. Hopefully, I'm going to get an invitation and I'm going to join you over there in Peoria. So thank you again. I'm going to ask my colleagues, I'm going to give you a very brief presentation. I know that I see that there are some questions, so I'd rather dedicate more time to the Q&A than a boring technical presentation. So I'm going to go really fast through a PowerPoint that I prepared. So I'm going to ask Claudia or Rocio, that are members of the consulate's team that are here, to give me a hand with the presentation, just to give you a general sense of who we are, what we are doing here. Probably you have heard from some other representatives of the diplomatic corps in not only here in Chicago, but perhaps in other parts of the US. It's very important for me to pass this message because we are closer to the Canadian border than to the Mexican border. So that sense of a region that somehow is working together, they have been working together for over 20 years to make things easier for the citizens at the end of the day through trade and other partnerships, I think is very important. You have heard, I'm pretty sure, that recently we updated our trade agreement. So we have the USMCA in place right now, and is what is providing coverage and certainty to the exchanges, economic exchanges that we have. So can you move on, Claudia, please? To give you a general sense, this is what North America is about, and then that includes our neighbors right here to the north, almost, right there, very close, and all the way to Mexico. The figures are huge. You can see the percentage of what the trade and the economic impact of the region represents in the world. And it's not something that is just, a coincidence. We've been working hard through all these years since we decided to engage in this economic partnership. There was much to be done, so that's why this effort was initiated a couple of years ago, and we could sign and put in force the new USMCA. And the consequences of that is that just now, just last year, we became the first trading partner of the US. So can you put the next slide, Claudia, please? Go ahead. So again, just general figures that show the importance of the bilateral trade. I always emphasize this part that is kind of mind-blowing when you see it, that trading goods and services between Mexico and the US exceeds $1 million per minute. That is really, at least for me, that I'm not an economist and I'm not in that field, kind of very difficult to comprehend, but that speaks about the intensity of our exchanges. And as I was saying, last year, for the first time in history, we became the first trading partner of the US. So go ahead, Claudia. Again, just to compare how it locates, the imports and export of the countries and how it compares with other countries. You can see the weight of the relationship that Mexico and Canada has with the US. It's interesting how China is very much in the imagination of every citizen in the US as someone very important for the US economy. But when you compare, of course it's important, China, but the weight of Mexico and Canada is much more solid and present. And then somehow I think is good that is not prominent, because all these disputes that you read over the papers that the US has with China. Go on, Claudia. You can see here some interesting figures about the impact in trade of the pandemic. Of course, what is really interesting is that the decrease is not as important, but it's not as significant as we could have expected. Of course, the situation that we are going through will have an impact not only in the lives that have been affected by the pandemic in terms of health or loss of jobs or other aspects. And I'm pretty sure that you also have heard that the Hispanic community has been disproportionately affected by this, that many Hispanic and Mexican workers are in the front line of the fight against COVID-19 in hospital, in services, in packing industry, in grocery shops, and et cetera, and then of course in the health sector. But also the economy in general terms has been touched by this crisis. Next, please. Again, I'm just gonna go very briefly through these figures, because as I said, I don't want to bombard you with numbers. But something that is really important is that we talk a lot about the Mexicans, the people of Mexican origin living in the US. But what is really interesting is that just the figure that we handle, although we know is much higher than that, is 1.5 million Americans living in Mexico. But it depends on the season. Many people in this region, because of the winter, go and live in Mexico for 3 months or 2 months every year. I'm going to say many of them undocumented, but we don't mind. And they are, enjoy Mexican weather. Now it's complicated. I was discussing with Angela that our border has been closed to all non-essential travels. So right now the border is only accepting emergencies, traveling for emergency reasons. But every year, permanently we have 1.5 million, and every year we go up to 2 million Americans spending time in Mexico, plus all the visitors that we have. The next one, please. As I was saying, the impact of the Mexican community in this country is huge. We have 35 million people of Mexican origin living in the US. This is something really interesting, the reaction that people have. 80% are legal residents. We have in mind that, you know, this, and some people that react very negatively to this think that all of them are undocumented or irregular. That's not true. 80% are US legal residents or American citizens. 11 million of them, of these 35 million, are born in Mexico, and 5 million are undocumented. You see how large is our border, the intensity of the exchanges, how it affects and how it touches the lives of many communities, not only in the border region, but also all the way here to Illinois, and we'll see that in a bit. Just for you to have a general sense of what Mexico represents in the world demographically and economically, we are almost 130 million Mexicans, and we are close or bigger. Our economy is bigger than many other countries like Russia, that are much present in the news or in the media that, you know, talk about international relations. Go on, Claudia. So how do we handle this very complex, dynamic, and intense relationship? I was posted in Washington, D.C., as Angela mentioned, for a while. And of course, the most important embassy that we have is the one that we have in Washington, D.C. And it's huge, and it's really interesting. I was for a while in charge of the relations, was part of the team that was in charge of relations with Congress. And it was really amazing to see how I could go and sit in hearings relating to migrating birds and, you know, other issues as heavy as security, drug trafficking, or democracy. Is so diverse. The agenda, the bilateral agenda, that is very difficult to handle this. So how do we handle the 35 million people of Mexican origin plus all these issues that we have on our table? So go on, Claudia. We have 50 consulates in the US. We cover the entire territory of the US through those 50 consulates, plus a consular section in our embassy in Washington, D.C. We have 5 consulates in Canada, and plus the embassy in Ottawa. But what is always surprising when I mention this to other people that are not familiar with this is that no other country has a consular network as large as Mexico has in the US. And that has to do with those 35 million that I mentioned, but also with the intensity of our exchanges, to those figures that I mentioned at the beginning. It's really a huge asset for Mexican diplomacy and Mexican foreign policy, being able to have representatives in such an important places, not only for our community, but for Mexico and our trade, like Illinois, you know, like Chicago. So we have, as I said, 50 consulates. Some of them, you know, some part of our consular network is larger in other states, like for example, in Texas, we have 11 consulates in Texas, or California, where we have 10 consulates. Of course, in the border area, there is more need to keep track of all the exchanges that we have. But here in this area, let's say that the anchor consulate is the one here in Chicago, but we have other consulates in Detroit, Indianapolis, St. Paul, and Milwaukee. And believe me, that's not enough. For, you know, if we have to respond timely and efficiently to all the demands of the bilateral relationship at a local level, even if we are 50 plus the consular section in the embassy, that still is not enough. So we have there are 2 big legs at every consulate that we have in the US. The one that has to do with addressing the needs of those 35 millions that I mentioned, and the other has to do with the other part, you know, to promote, engage with local authorities, but also promote trade, investment, tourism, education, and culture. The part that, you know, people know the most about the work that we do is those related to citizen services. And if you put the next slide, Claudia, please. This is what we do, the kind of services that we provide for the community. And these, as you can see, allow the consulate to engage with many important local actors, not only the authorities in the counties and the states and cities, but also organizations like you, or other institutions that have to do with education or culture or health. This kind of consular diplomacy, in fact, opens up other doors, many doors for Mexico and for the consulate. We are, for example, right now engaged with several coalitions that have to do with health. We have signed agreements related to the protection of the rights of women and the defense of women that are in the context of domestic violence, for example, or the care of minors or unaccompanied minors of Mexican origin. So this diversity of services that we provide are not only restricted to the area of providing documents or legal services or civil registry to our citizens. So it broadens the scope of what we do and allow us to engage with many, many institutions, actually making our consular diplomacy much more strong. So the next one, please. Claudia? Yeah, there we go. Just a general overview of how the relation is with Illinois. Go on with the next, Claudia. These are the figures between regarding the changes of Mexico and Illinois. You can see that Mexico is the second largest export market for Illinois, and the third largest import market. The areas in which we trade, and if you put the next one, Claudia, you can see the many Mexican companies and Illinois companies that have presence in both countries. It's really interesting to see that. Many people have the idea that investment goes from the north to the south, but that's not the case. We have many companies here. We have, of course, many of them in the border region, and as far as the Carolinas or other areas in the East Coast or the West Coast. But here in Illinois, the presence of Mexican companies is also very, very strong. Go ahead, Claudia. So in this area, we are talking, according to the census, of up close to 2 million Mexicans. Many of them, as you can see, first generation, coming from the states of Michoacán, Guerrero. For those that have been in Mexico know what I'm talking about. But this figure is bigger when we consider that this consulate covers the state of Illinois and the northern part of Indiana. So in true, we are serving a population close to 3 million people when we put together all that. We are one of the largest consulates in the US, next to New York and LA. We are considered like the 3 anchor consulates that Mexico has in the United States. You go ahead, Claudia. So just, I wanted to end with this image. If you put the next slide, please. I'm pretty sure that you have seen, I've been listening since I arrived that, Chicago is one of the most segregated cities, in that this area is very complex to interact with, because, there are several bubbles that not all the time interact with each other. I found that fascinating, and there's a certain truth about that. But what I found is that the people in this state and in this many cities that I have visited is very much willing to engage and know and to learn more about Mexico. That has been such an incredible surprise, not only welcoming, but, assuming the relevance of the community here, and actually celebrating the diversity. The Mexican community here is the largest minority than any other. Actually, I'm pretty sure that after this census, we are going to be the first minority above the African American community. And it's our duty precisely to build bridges and to make sure that we have a good relationship with all the other groups that are represented in this area. That we want to be part of that celebration of the diversity and the strength of the people in this region. We launched, and actually I'm going to ask Claudia to put in the chat perhaps the link. We launched a campaign this year called Mexicans in the Midwest. And we showcased people of Mexican origin, not only born in Mexico, but also born from Mexican parents or descendants of Mexicans that are in this area, that are contributing with the economy, with the society, in education, in arts and culture. Many women, young women of Mexican origin that are in politics, you know. It's always fascinating for me to see those young people born from, you know, immigrants, how strong they are and how willing they are to contribute to the communities and be part of a positive change in the area. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm really looking forward to your questions and the dialogue.
Wow, thank you. That's a lot of really thought-provoking and thoughtful information. One of the last things you said has really resonated with me, that the neighborhood, the Mexican-American neighborhood in Chicago, is the second highest tax-generating neighborhood in the city after the Magnificent Mile. And that says a lot to our perceptions about immigration, immigrants, and the contributions they make to this country. And so thank you. Those are important statistics to point out. Already folks are putting questions in the chat, but it's my privilege to ask the first one. And I'd be remiss if this is not the top of most people's minds. What advice would you give President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris? What do you think their priorities should be in the relationship between the United States and Mexico?
I can spend hours talking about that, so I'm not going to do that, I promise. I think that the most important part for us is two things. That there is a recognition, and I know they have it. I know the team that is working with them already has that. In fact, every president from, you know, every party, all of the two parties, throughout, you know, our relationship, and I can testify on that because I was posted in Washington, D.C., have been aware of the importance and the weight of the relationship with Mexico. That's why we had NAFTA in place, and that's why we have USMCA, and that's something that was initiated by, you know, previous governments, regardless of the party or the political party here and in the US. We are frequently asked if we prefer a democratic government or a Republican government in Washington. What we want is the possibility to have a dialogue, you know, to sit down and talk. We are used to that. That's part of the relationship, of a mature relationship. We're not going to agree all the time, but we, without pressure, you know, without prejudices, we want the space to sit down, negotiate, and talk, and decide what is best for the populations and for the communities on both sides of the border. So that's one of the things, the recognition of the weight of the Mexican really bilateral relationship. And the other one, of course, has to do with our community here. We would like to engage in a dialogue about dreamers, you know, DACA recipients. What's going to happen with them? How can we help, you know, many other issues that have to do with the Mexican community here in the U.S. So I'm pretty sure that you know, our embassy is already working on that. You know, that the dialogue and the set is you know, the scene is being set for a more constructive relationship within the coming government.
Thank you. So a couple people have submitted questions in the chat and sent them to me directly as well. I'm going to start with this one. Mexico is the fourth largest producer of oil after the United States, Canada, and Brazil. Mexico is rich in natural gas and oil reserves that attract foreign direct investment. Understanding that Mexico has not authorized upstream operations, but it allows transformation of the oil in refining products as gasoline and also midstream operations, May I ask what Mr. Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, your president, is doing to meet commitments from American companies that present their investment plans to the Secretariat of Energy and SENER authorized in 2019 for projects that should begin to be fulfilled in 2021? It's a little complicated one from our business community.
It's technical and complicated now, but I know it's exactly what they are talking about. It will require perhaps a follow-up, one-to-one. If I can have, or if you can share perhaps the Rocio's email, we can address this specifically. But what I can say is that when President Obrador took office, the Secretary of Energy made very clear that the agreements or the commitments that Mexico acquired after the 2014 reform of the energy sector were going to be respected. This president questioned a lot of the terms of those agreements. He didn't agree with many of those. And I am pretty sure that that required a very intense internal debate from the different governmental offices that deal with energy and with their that are engaged with foreign companies in this field. I know that conversation is still ongoing, but we are very aware of the obligation that we have in fulfilling previous commitments. That is for sure. But I cannot deny that there is an internal conversation to accommodate the views of the President Obrador and the commitments of that were acquired previous to him taking office.
Okay, thank you. From the chat, is there a need for a wall between the United States and Mexico?
No, I think that we need technology, we need security, and we need cooperation. We are not for breaking the law, not in Mexico, not in the US. We managed to have mature conversations in which we can agree on how to manage the immigration flows, not only from Mexico, but also from Central America and other regions. I think we can, if we can have that dialogue, that we haven't been able to do that in recent years, but if we can have that dialogue in a constructive way, we can modernize even more our border and make it more secure and safe for our citizens and for the American citizens.
Good. I want to ask a follow-on question because I think that's another area where most Americans don't really connect the dots, is that immigration problems are also a problem for Mexico, because most of the people crossing the border illegally also cross Mexico's southern border. So this is a common issue, a common security problem. And are there better ways to address the root causes of this illegal immigration, particularly from, for example, the Northern Triangle countries, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, those countries?
That's absolutely right, Angela. That's a view that should prevail. We have been talking about this for decades. If we don't go and address the issues at the core, in the roots, where it originates not only in Mexico, but also in Central America, we are just managing this, and postponing a solution. We need good technology, we need security. Let me talk a little bit about that in a minute. But also we need to address this in a comprehensive manner, with a long-term view, and also in a humane way. We're talking about human beings that are looking for better ways to provide for their families. And all this is kind of contaminated by criminal organizations right now, by drug trafficking, by the trafficking of human beings. So we need to address those issues. And what I know for sure after all these years dealing with immigration and security issues and bilateral issues is that unilateral solutions do not work. One view or one, mind solutions don't work. We need to be aware that this issue has multiple answers, and just addressing it from the legal point of view is not going to work. Or just trying to provide shelter for the migrants, that's good, that's important, and we need to do that. But we need to do many other things. at the same time. And let me give you just a word about the security issues. Not many people know that, and Rocio, you can correct me here, please speak up, but I think that what's the percentage of US originated guns that are confiscated in Mexico that are part of the crimes in Mexico? Do you remember that figure, Rocio? I don't know if it's 70% or 80%, but it's really high, you know. So for every crime that is committed in Mexico, when they confiscate the guns or the rifles or, you know, other sorts of arms and weapons, you know, 80% of them come from the United States and are smuggled into Mexico. Also the bulk cash that goes from the United States to Mexico and from Mexico to the United States. So those things have to be addressed as well. Not only the drugs, but if we're not going, as I said, to the core of issues, we are just, you know, not really going to deeper into the issues, but just like a cosmetic way to approach what's going on.
Good point. So if we look at the world like this, we miss a whole lot of things on those sides. One of the areas, a follow-on as well, that was just added to that question is the Alliance for, and I've just lost it, the Alliance for Prosperity in the Northern Triangle. That was a program that was supported by President Obama that was defunded by President Trump because it didn't seem to be getting the return on investment that the Trump administration wanted it to have. Is that something that Mexico thinks would be helpful to look at the root causes of poverty, violence, mass immigration from the Northern Triangle?
Absolutely. In fact, our foreign minister, Marcelo Ebrard, worked really hard at the beginning of this administration to trying to commit support from other countries, you know, as far as Japan or Germany, to invest in the Northern Triangle of Central America, precisely to address the root causes of immigration. We will be happy, and I'm pretty sure that our embassy and the foreign minister already have a plan to put before the new administration in the US to move on in this area. That's something that they've been trying to do from day one, and it's going to be part of the conversations, the bilateral conversations that we have with the Biden administration.
Especially after so many hurricanes have slammed that region, that just contributes to the poverty and the mass migrations. So,
okay.
What are Mexico's initiatives to obtain COVID-19 vaccines? Switch gears a little bit.
This is something really unusual because it fell in the portfolio of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He's been very active, and the Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs also in two fronts. First, to make sure that we lobby before multilateral organizations the need to guarantee access to the vaccine in countries that have weak economies, or that perhaps are, you know, third world countries that don't have the means, the resources, or the technology developed to access, distribute, and provide vaccines to the population. So that's something that Mexico lobbied, and actually there was a resolution that was approved in the UN regarding precisely this initiative. So that's one side, and the other side has to do with talking to the pharmaceutical companies to make sure that we have the commitment to buy vaccines so we can make them available in Mexico. And it created like a coalition and a big group of companies that we approach and that we have already the commitment to buy and have available the vaccines for the Mexican population.
Very good. And that's actually self-serving for the United States as well, since so many people cross the border for trade, for tourism between our two countries. It's actually good for us if you all get vaccinated as well. So that just makes sense in the world. What do you think about Mexico's influence in the Peoria area?
I think that you can speak more about that myself. I'm looking forward to go and visit more. I had a chance to be there before the pandemic, but you know, these months have been just ridiculous. I think that the influence of Mexico, I wouldn't necessarily call it influence, but I think that the contacts that we have and the presence that we have is everywhere. You know, even in the suburban areas, in other remote areas, of, you know, other parts of the country that are rural. And let me just give you a brief anecdote. Some of my colleagues were very surprised when we engaged in the negotiation of NAFTA, that some of the governors of the agricultural states were not aware that as far as, you know, 60, 70, 80% of the production of their agricultural goods were sent to Mexico, and how dependent they were from Mexico. They didn't know. I mean, perhaps the companies knew, perhaps the agricultures, the farm workers knew, but not the governors. So when we approached them to ask to speak up in favor of the negotiation of the USMCA, they were, you know, really, and actually they were key to talk to the Trump administration. I remember there was a certain reluctance at the beginning. So the agricultural sector was part of this effort. So, you know, many of the strawberries and the turkeys that are in the supermarkets in the state of Illinois come from Mexico. But most importantly, I want to speak about the people of Mexican origin, the culture, the Mexican culture. I think that you can see that, you can feel that in many parts of the United States. We need to know each other better so we can, you know, stop the stereotypes, stop, you know, all those negative aspects that were put out there for perhaps political purposes, calling Mexicans names and saying, you know, that we are what we really are not. So the only solution to that is information. The only antidote to fear is to promote a better knowledge of each other. So that's what I'm looking forward to do more in Peoria.
And thank you. We're most anxious to have you as our guest here as well. So, and speaking of agricultural products, a few years ago I had the opportunity to visit Guanajuato State as the guest of your former president, Vicente Fox, and the kinds of products that his own ranch, his own hacienda produces and exports to the United States, like broccoli. A huge portion of the broccoli that I love to eat comes from his estate. So the exchange is rather impressive. And I found your statistic that we, the United States, have in Illinois have reduced our exports to Mexico by over 30%. I'm not certain why, and perhaps you can ask that, but the imports from Mexico have only declined during this period of COVID by just over 9%. So do you have a estimation, a guess of why the exports from from Illinois to Mexico have dropped so sharply?
I'm not, I'd rather, you know, ask an expert, but my intuition tells me that it has to do with the sectors that are in which, you know, the exports and the imports are concentrated. So in terms of our exports here to the state of Illinois, we're talking a lot about agriculture, you know, and other products that perhaps were not affected necessarily by the pandemic. But if other industries had to stop or decrease their operation, that's what is reflected in the exports of Illinois to Mexico. But I look into that. I'm pretty sure there's an explanation.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it's COVID, I'm sure. Overarching is COVID. So whatever wasn't essential or couldn't make it across the border. But I just was curious at the, you know, we've continued to rely on imports from Mexico. So that's good that they're continuing. And in regards to that USMCA, it's requiring, the new negotiations require that the labor use in manufacturing automobiles and parts has to pay wages of $16 per hour. Does Mexico have a strategic plan that they're working on to comply with this regulation?
Yeah, there is a plan. This was one of the very positive things that this administration introduced to the already ongoing negotiations that were taking place between the two countries. So when the Mexican new administration took office 2 years ago and engaged in those negotiations, this was one of the most important things that they were asking for. I think that these kind of measures introduce more benefits for our workers. That was a huge disadvantage. Rocio, you can speak in more detail about the labor aspect of the USMCA.
Yes, for example, the Mexican government invested in creating new courts within the judiciary branch in order to do the follow-up on these particular cases related to labor.
Okay.
So it's there are the measures and there's the budget already. Actually, many members of the U.S. Congress asked or waited until Mexico guaranteed that the Mexican government put in place budget to land these new measures, to make these new measures possible before they supported or voted in favor of the ratification of the USMCA. So the Mexican government guaranteed that the legal framework was in place to enforce these provisions, but also the budget.
And I think, if I may posit a theory, that was added to the negotiations to encourage U.S. companies to produce their goods in the United States and pay a living wage within the United States. But these are U.S. companies that are being obligated to pay those higher wages in Mexico. Is that correct?
Not only U.S. companies, but Rocio, why don't you answer that one?
No, all the companies, Mexicans that are doing activities within the auto sector, under the auto sector.
And not necessarily from the U.S. or Mexico, many other companies that have settled in Mexico to be able to export to the North American market from other parts of the world. They will have to fulfill these new measures.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I've lost my place. What is the current peso dollar exchange rate and how has that changed in recent years?
It's been pretty stable. I don't know today how it opened, Rocio, but it's around 19 US pesos per dollar. Yeah, 19 pesos per US dollar. Sorry.
Okay. And do you have would you care to speculate on why President Lopez Obrador took so long to recognize Joe Biden in his victory in the election?
Actually, it's taking so long because he hasn't congratulated him. It had to do with his personal history and the way he won the election and the way he struggled for many years to be able to, in a democratic context, be recognized, win the election, and campaign and all that. It has to do more with that than with any other thing. So he wanted to make sure that whatever happens in Mexico in the future, other countries take the time until it's clear and solid the victory of any other candidate to congratulate him. He claimed after the election in 2000. After President Fox, actually, that illegally the opposition, or the other party, the PAN, took the presidency, and that he actually won the election. So he was very upset seeing other countries rushing to recognize the President Calderon, and so that's why he's doing this. But it's more a conviction, a personal conviction, and is based actually in some measures provided for in our constitution. So, but as I said, I'm pretty sure that he's waiting, and actually there are talks in the ministry, in the foreign ministry already. Just they have the letters ready, they have the telephone numbers ready, just to make sure that the date is December 14. Something like that.
Monday.
Yeah, so everything is in place. They're just waiting for that day.
Yeah. Okay, very good. The incoming president probably won't hold any grudges. Sorry, we are a nonpartisan organization, but that was contributed with the comment about recognizing him. And the last one that's been entered, what is the status of Central Americans who are passing through Mexico on their way to the United States, and how do you see that changing in the Biden administration?
Let me just say something very brief about the previous question. I don't know if many of you know, but the Biden team not engaged in any dialogues and deep conversations on any issue with any foreign country, precisely because of what what happened 4 years ago. They don't want to give any sense that they are in conversations or making commitments with foreign governments before taking office. So kind of is both ways, that caution that they are taking, not only in Mexico but also here, the Biden team. Just going back to what you mentioned, it's been very complicated. At the beginning of this administration, President Obrador and our foreign minister wanted, as I mentioned, to launch a very ambitious set of measures to address the issue of immigration from Central America to Mexico. Among those things, the lobby for more resources and investment in Central America. But the pandemic and the caravans and many of other things happened, and also there was reluctance in the Trump administration to engage in that part of the conversation. But we knew that we had to put in place measures to reduce the flows of migrants going through Mexico and coming to the U.S. And there is also pressure. This is something very logic from the governors at the border, because many of them that were going to the border with the intention to cross to the U.S. Remain at the border. They couldn't cross, so they put pressure on the social and public services that the governments, the cities and the state governments at the border do. So there are measures to provide orderly repatriations of many of them. There were big push to improve the capabilities of the Mexican Institute for Migration to shelter the migrants in the detention centers while they were processed. The increase in numbers of people that have been granted asylum in Mexico has, has increased dramatically. I don't remember the exact figures, but it's really impressive how few years ago we were processing 1,000 requests for asylum, and in the lapse of 5 years right now we are close to 20,000 per year. So that's also huge. So we are trying to provide them with documents to go through the processes. We are giving them the option to ask for asylum in Mexico.
Very good. That's an expensive and heavy task. Very good. Bernie asks, drugs, gangs, and violence have been a serious concern in Mexico for some time. Reporters covering these issues have been killed. I haven't heard much recently. Does that mean things are getting better? What is Mexico doing about this kind of violence?
So hopefully they are getting better, but there's an effort. There was a deep change in the way we organize our law enforcement. The National Guard was created. And we are in the last phases, I think, of implementation of a broad judicial reform that took years, to put in place. So I'm pretty sure that we will see the results of that in the coming years. It's a very complicated issue. As I said, its solution is not dependent only on what the Mexican government does or the Mexican state governments do. It has to do with the bilateral cooperation and extra-regional cooperation, because we know that many of the substances that are required to make, new drugs that are being consumed here and in other parts of Mexico and in other parts of the world come from Asia, for example. They go sometimes through Mexico, sometimes directly to the US. So we have to address this issue not only in its financial aspects, in its law enforcement aspects, but also the human and health aspects. We can keep saying, forever and ever, control your consumption and we will control the production, It has to be all of the above at the same time. And there is a serious thought about legalization. I mean, we are really interested in finding a long-term solution. At least we should have that conversation.
Okay.
Because, you know, all what we are doing most of the times is strengthening those criminal networks that are not only in Mexico, they are all over. No, even here in Illinois, this city has, Chicago has, you know, a history in that. Some good practices that we can share, actually, some that we should not share.
Yeah.
It's a very complex issue, and the more we lay a comprehensive response, a very strong response, you know, we're just giving room for them to continue profiting with the health and the lives of people that are killed in Mexico and that are killed here in the U.S. because of the drug trafficking.
Yes. Right. And another issue of regional concern is Venezuela. And so I think the Trump administration was a bit concerned that your president was not willing to throw over Maduro in favor of Juan Guaido. How does Mexico stand on Venezuela, and what do you think Mexico should do, if anything, about that country?
Because of our history, and actually is one of the principles that we have in our foreign policy, we are not in the job of throwing away any government. I mean, we all have been consistent in trying to find peaceful solutions without intervening, not only intervening politically, but, you know, of course, with the use of force in other countries. So that's not the part of our foreign policy. We promote other spaces for dialogue, other areas in which we can encourage governments to find solutions. This government in Mexico has a different approach. They feel sympathy with many of the principles that other governments in Latin America, you know, are putting out there. There is affinity in the way they are thinking, but I think that we have been respectful of their internal processes. We are, of course, ready and willing to denounce when there is violence from any side. We always look for peaceful solutions, and those are the basic principles that this government promotes in the region.
Okay. And what is the state of Chinese influence in Mexico? Is it as strong as their initiatives in Central and South America? And I think that's in reference perhaps to the Belt and Road Initiative, but other relations as well.
Well, there's certainly a big influence of China all over the world. For geographical reasons, you know, the ties that we have with the U.S. and Canada, our natural space for, you know, many things is the space of North America. So that's something that a process that we initiated over 20 years ago when we put in place NAFTA. And many of the things or the engagements that we have with China, in the same way that Canada does, and precisely in the context of the economic exchanges, go through USMCA, you know. But also, I see China has been trying to put a foot in certain parts of Mexico. I see an influence, for example, in the coasts for obvious reasons, through investment, but nothing compared to what happens in other countries for Central America, where the presence is really, really strong. I think, and Rocio, if I'm missing something, there's of course an effort by the Chinese government to engage more Mexico, to talk about other issues, but so far their main concern is regional, and their extra-regional concern have to do with investment and trade.
And I think probably this might be the last question. We're getting close to noon. How has climate change affected crops in Mexico and Central America?
Well, it has been bad in Central America. You know, I'm pretty sure that in Mexico we have also seen the impact of this. But actually, one of the sources of the migration flows and the caravans that we have seen from Central America will have to do precisely with this with this issue of climate change. You can see, and I had the opportunity when I was engaged in Central and Latin American issues in the Mexican Foreign Ministry to visit Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador many times, and you can see how, you know, the origin of all many other things related to gangs, violence, and immigration are rooted in precisely this, the lack of opportunities there and the devastation of their ecosystems.
Do you think there's environmental issues within Mexico that perhaps not related to climate change, but the Mayan train, for example, other environmental projects that threaten some great forests and other climate related areas, if you will? I'm not phrasing that correctly, but I mean, we have our own problems in the United States where we worry about what our industries do to negatively impact the environment. Are there areas that you think Mexico should be paying closer attention to within Mexico?
Of course, it's a challenge. We were part of the COP16 process at a multilateral level. Actually, we were very active. We were, you know, heading or leading that effort in many senses. And I know that there is concern of certain initiatives that this administration has put in place. What I find very reassuring is that our democratic institutions and our legal framework and judicial system has been open to hear the concerns of people that have been speaking about the ecological consequences of some of these initiatives. And actually, those processes are ongoing. And, you know, that's the way democracy works. I think that's very positive.
Okay. And the question about Venezuela sparked one last one. So do you think Mexico could help mediate a détente between the United States and Cuba? And do you think it's in our best interest and Mexico's best interest to normalize that relationship?
Of course, we would like to see Cuba engaged. As I mentioned, there is affinity in this government with many of the principles that, you know, are defended by or were defended, you know, after the Cuban Revolution, like no intervention, you know, like the respect of the economists and the domestic political processes. And as I mentioned, many of those principles are in our legal framework, in our constitution. So yes, there is certain affinity. Cuba has been a constant in the Mexican foreign policy. We would like to see change. We would like to see openness. It's very complicated, and you know surely better than me that, you know, there are certain groups in the U.S. that have a lot of weight in this, and it would depend on who's in the White House, you know, how much and the approach, how much weight they put in this, in the opinions of these groups, and or how they channel, you know, their concerns. Florida and Miami play a huge role. You know, whatever the Latin American countries, including Mexico or the U.S., plan to do, it has to go through whatever is going on in Florida and the forces that are, you know, perhaps fighting there for the same reason. I saw in this last election here in the U.S. how important this issue and the issue of Venezuela was for the people in Florida and in Miami. So, you know, there is something to be taken on account, not only for the Biden administration, for also for countries like Mexico and other countries in Latin America that want to do something to put Cuba in a better position after, you know, with the embargo and other measures that the U.S. has taken.
It would certainly be a relief for everybody in the region. And I believe we have come to the end of our hour. Please join me in thanking Ambassador Torres. This has been a terrific discussion, very broad-reaching, and thank you for being so generous with your time to offer us such thought-provoking responses. You've given us a lot to consider in our relationship with our closest southern neighbor and our very, very important cultural and social, political, economic ties. with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today and wish you a good weekend. If you are not yet a member of the World Affairs Council, please become a member at pawac.org. And when we get back to some kind of normalcy where we get to be in person, I would love to have you come to Peoria so we can show you all of our terrific region here in Central Illinois. We're a big town, not Chicago size, but we're a good, healthy town. So thank you, Ambassador Torres, and thank you to Rocio and Claudia for their help as well today. And we'll see you all for Taiwan next Thursday.